This is Money Made Simple, the financial podcast that keeps it simple and gets to the point.
Kia ora and welcome back to Money Made Simple, brought to you by Simplicity. Today we have a very exciting guest on the podcast, Josh Taylor, or JT, I think as you like to be called. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thank you.
Co-founder of both Tax Traders and Taxi, two companies that are a whole lot to do with tax, which we'll get into, but both of which Simplicity's private equity fund have invested in, correct?
Correct.
Cool. So let's just start with telling me a little bit about yourself in general.
So grew up in Hillsborough, mum and dad and two sisters. Mum and dad had a business, family business, so kind of saw that growing up. I had a granddad who was a property developer.
Yeah, you come from like a family of go-getters.
Like having a family business growing up, you kind of saw the best and the worst of it. Certainly a time in my early 20s, I was saying, where can I find a career or a job that will give me all of the upside of having your own business with none of the risk?
None of the downside.
None of the downside. And I think it probably just took a little while to realize that's actually really hard to find. It kind of doesn't exist. And I thought I could do that with investment banking, actually, because I thought, you get these huge bonuses and it's awesome. But even in these high-paying jobs, they're not unicorns. There's always a trade-off.
So if you wanted to be an investment banker originally,
Yeah.
that mean you didn't always see yourself necessarily as an entrepreneur?
No, because there was a narrative we had growing up where we'd say, oh, mum and dad, can we do a thing? And for a while there, it was like, oh, that's not possible right now because the business is soaking up all the money.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't
want to be that.
I don't want to be that parent where I'm telling my kids, oh, yeah, I'd love to do that for you, but I can't because the business is soaking up all the money. So having your own business was a curse as much as it was a blessing. And so it took a while just to work through the how am I going to navigate those moments when it feels like you can't keep your kids happy and keep the business running. How are you going to navigate that?
And I mean, you've started two businesses alongside Nicola, your wife, in tax. Were you always obsessed with tax? Or?
No, not at all. I spent 2 years as a lawyer. Then I moved into business and commercial banking with BNZ. Working at BNZ, I got to engage with a whole raft of businesses across the economy. And that was actually quite pivotal in that journey to getting to actually maybe I could run a business, or maybe running a business wouldn't be so bad. You start to see if you follow the right rules or you have the right disciplines, you can drastically improve your odds of making something work. And so also realized that a lot of these businesses, they're all looking for owners and succession. And so I thought, well, look, the first thing is to find a smaller size business to get a real understanding of how do you do this, how do you do that. And so the next role I got out of banking was into SME business like that to really understand how business
How it all works. Okay. And how did the tax thing come up?
So the business I actually moved into was actually in the tax pooling space.
Gotcha.
I knew very little about tax. I had studied tax law at university.
So you knew something probably more than your average Joe.
Probably
about
more than the average Joe. And so I actually got headhunted into the tax job out of the bank.
Gotcha. And then how did that evolve into deciding to start up your own tax-related business?
Yeah, I mean, so 5 years down the track, working with this business they were the first tax pool in New Zealand, and I ended up being made redundant.
Okay.
So that's how that chapter closed. And and you know what? The funny thing is, it's actually a pretty common thread.
It's much more common nowadays, right?
Yeah, and one of the things I guess I took from that is that opportunity comes disguised as a problem.
Absolutely.
And so you learn to look for problems because there's always an opportunity sitting out of it or sitting behind it. And sometimes it takes a while to come through. The first 6 months after I got made redundant, like almost every day I was saying, we are so off plan here. This is, I didn't want to be here, but out of that problem
came the opportunity. So tell me what happened. How did it come about?
Thinking about, what to do next. Because I've been working in quite a niche industry, I'd built up a lot of experience, but I was still pretty young. No one wanted to take me on to run their business. So it was hard to trade my skills into an equivalent role somewhere else. And there was a conversation with my brother-in-law one day, and he said, oh, have you guys thought about doing your own thing? I'm like, I couldn't possibly do that. That sounds like the most terrifying thing.
So you hadn't thought about it at that stage?
No.
So you made the decision to start this business together?
Yeah, and so we had so again, pivotal conversation on the kitchen table. And we said, look, if we're going to do this, we don't want to be just another Me Too offering. And so in the job I'd been working, tax pooling space, it was really just looking after the big boys at that stage, the corporates and your top tier accounting firms. And what tax pooling does is it makes it easier as a business to get your tax right, to pay it in a way that works for your business and still make sure you're compliant with inland revenue. And cash and cash flow is the major problem for businesses. And so timing your tax payments can be really helpful. So we said two things. The first one we want to do is we want to make the benefits of inland revenue's tax pooling regime available to everyone.
So not just the big fish?
Not just the big fish. We want to make it available to everyone. And the second is that we think business can be a force for good. We want business to be a positive influence. So helpfully, about this time, I ended up in a lecture at Auckland University where I think a visiting entrepreneur was talking, and he said, if you're going to start a business, here's a few things that won't guarantee success, but it reduces the failure rate from 9 out of 10 to about 7 out of 10. And the first one was do something you know. Pick something you actually know something about. So don't just go and start a cafe. Then he said, make sure you've got a good founder team around you, or you've got someone else there with you. And the cool thing about Nicola and I, although we're life partners, we make great business partners as well, because between the two of us, we had quite a complementary skill set. So have some co-founders around you, then if you can get a couple of key customers on day one, just means you've got a foundation, you've validated on day one that someone will buy. And so we took that and go, that's the universe giving us a signal, hey, if you're going to do this, tick these boxes and make sure you've got some of this stuff in place. On the other one, it's have enough capital. And this will be interesting for this story too. So have enough capital to do what you do.
Right.
And so the truth is we didn't have enough capital.
Right. So that was not a tick.
Well, that wasn't a tick, but we got all the capital we could. So we sold the house, cashed ourselves up, tipped everything in to start the business. It was all the money we had, so it had to be enough.
Yep. And how did those first months and years go?
So it took us 18 months to get our first customer on board. And we got down to $3,000 left to our name. We had a heartfelt conversation between the two of us in the kitchen one night, a couple of weeks before Christmas, saying, okay, we can move back in with mum and dad. We can pull the kids out of school. We're still young enough to restart.
Get jobs?
Get jobs somewhere else. Yeah, we've burned through a few $100,000 of our capital. Yep. We'll have to start with a massive mortgage and do all of that stuff.
Start from scratch.
Then about 2 weeks after that, we landed our first major transaction and put $90,000 in the bank, and that paid off a few things and got a few things in place. And
felt very momentarily rich.
Well, we're not out of the woods yet, but it allowed us to keep investing in the business, basically.
Right. And did it kind of start to the outlook?
That's if you draw a line on the graph, that's when the trend line started to change.
Just took a little while.
I think it does take a little while, and I think the lesson is it always takes longer than you think. Whatever you think it is, it's going to take longer than
and it's probably going to be harder than that.
It's undoubtedly going to be harder because we don't have perfect knowledge. You do the best homework that you can and talk to people. At that stage, it's still only your most educated guess as to what your customers will want to do. So coming back to our story with tax traders, we wanted to help the little guys. At the same time, there were a number of large corporates that actually really wanted to back what we were doing, because they looked at that and said, in the tax pooling space, it's not a competitive market. We know that if there's a competitive offering, it will be better for us.
So you had to widen your scope out.
So we had to widen the scope. Yeah. So we listened to that, and the interesting thing about that is providing that for corporates, although that wasn't our initial goal, paid the bills and kept the lights on that enabled us to turn around and deliver for the SME space.
So you need to be able to adapt, right? As you learn from business. Yep.
That's right. Hear the signals you're getting back from the market, and sometimes the getting from A to B isn't a straight line.
Yeah, don't be so bloody-minded that no, this is what I set out to do and this is how I'm going to do
that's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
And fast forward a little bit, how did Simplicity and the private equity fund come into play?
Yeah, cool. So I sort of alluded to that, have enough capital to do what you're going to do, and we really bootstrapped tax traders when we got it off the ground. So fast forward through a couple of years, going through COVID, a couple of very large NZX-listed corporate taxpayers rang us up and said, hey, we've got tens of millions of dollars of tax sitting with you guys, but we actually need that money back in our business because we're not going to get through the 100-day lockdown without extra cash in our business. And so we were able to release that tax money out of the tax pool back into their business. They made use of that and then they repaid it. And that's essentially the broad structure that Taxi operates on. But at that stage, it was a really complex process. It was only available to big corporates. This is something that would be really meaningful for SMEs. So we had that moment.
The problem,
Opportunity. And so we said we want to do this thing, we're going to call it Taxi, that enables you to use the income tax that you've paid for your business as security for funding for your business, because the tax just sits at inland revenue for up to 18 months doing nothing. And so we said, well, let's find a way to make that dead time actually usable for your business so you can actually keep hold of the cash. But we wanted to have more capital so we could actually do that at scale, at pace, and bring it to market. And so that was the genesis behind Simplicity coming on board. And, and it's been a great partnership.
So Simplicity's private equity fund and team came on board at the stage of developing Taxi.
Yeah, we'd been working on it for about a year and a half. We'd done a lot of market research. We'd worked through probably 2 or 3 design iterations, and we're now getting to the 6 months before we put it out in the wild
Boots on the ground
stage.
Yep.
And at the same time, our first business, Tax Traders, is continuing to grow. And so we're talking to a number of different people. And anyway, we had this great moment where the design agency we were using for Taxi said, oh, I know the guys over at Simplicity, maybe you should have a conversation with them. I said, great, let's do that. We sit down for a meeting. We walked out of that first meeting, and Nicola and I kind of looked at each other and said, hey, we might have just found our people. We'd had a few conversations by this time. We were getting pretty good at picking stuff, but it was like, yeah, I think we found our people.
Cool. And the rest is history, right?
Yeah, and the rest is history. I mean, there's a certain number of lessons you just have to learn.
Tell me some of those most powerful lessons.
Money doesn't substitute. Having more capital to get your business off the ground doesn't substitute for knowing your customer, and it doesn't substitute for making the right hiring decisions at the right time, or doing all the discipline of getting the feedback from your customers, getting the feedback from users, getting the nuts and bolts right. It's actually just hard work. You can't avoid hard work.
You can't buy your way out of that.
That's right. You can't buy your way out of hard work. And again, I guess that's the propensity all of us have as humans to try and find the easiest way through things.
Course.
I think with some things there are only less hard ways to do it. Or if it's too easy, it's not. You're actually on the wrong path in some respects.
So having your own business is going to involve hard work, regardless.
Well, it is. But again, it's a pick your poison. Having your own business opens up a wider range of possibilities for your
problems and opportunities.
Problems and opportunities. But also, running a business is absolutely not for everyone, because it stops with you. You have to be willing to
not go to Hawaii.
Not go to, well, kind of. When everything's going badly, you've got to be the one that runs towards the fire, not runs away from it or runs towards danger, because there will be opportunity on the other side of that problem. The only way is through. You can't avoid it or get around it.
Any major mistakes that you've made along the way?
We've made them all. A lot of the mistakes stem from, you rush to make a decision. A couple of like the rules of thumb, hire slow and fire fast. That's like really true. At the same time, it's a tension, right? It's a judgment call. Like sometimes people will ultimately be great for the organisation. Maybe they just started in the wrong role. And we've got a number of examples of that on our team. Equally, we've got examples of we just shouldn't have hired that person in the first place.
Or should have cut it earlier.
There are lessons on sometimes you are too slow to market. The world moves fast. You need to learn to operate on, we talk about, say, 70% information. You will never get it 100% right. And if you wait till it's 100% right, the world will have changed and you've got to go and redo. So you have to be comfortable saying, I've got enough of the facts to make an educated decision, and we actually put this out in the wild. People will hopefully love most of it. There will be 20% they don't like. We'll iterate from there.
If you could go back to the start of Tax Traders or even the start of Taxi,
sure.
Would you do anything vastly differently?
I would like to think I would start earlier.
Okay.
So I was 35 and Nicola was 34 when we started. It's ultimately been a great journey for us. And so when it's a great journey, you kind of think, if we could start earlier. The flip side is I don't think I was emotionally and ready. I wasn't ready for it.
You said know your business.
Know your business, yeah. Yeah, and, I'd also love to be in a boy band if I could have a total do-over, right?
You kind of look like you could be. True millennial.
Yeah.
And any top tips for any kind of budding young entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
Watch-outs or tips?
Yeah, watch-outs or tips. I'd say do your homework ahead of time, like find something that you already know something about. Get some people around you. Have a good support team, co-founder team. If you can get some customers on board from day one.
So have that demand there.
Yeah, so you validated a base level of interest for what we're doing here. We're not selling sweatshirts for cats or something. Maybe that is a thing, I don't know.
I think it should be.
Yeah. So do that homework, but then also you have to have a lot of grit. You've got to be willing to stay open to feedback, make changes, adjust, bring people on, have that grit to wrestle through stuff. I think the world actually wants to make you succeed, right? People want you to succeed, but that doesn't make it a given. You've still got to work really hard, and you've got to constantly adapt and keep coming up with new ideas, keep challenging yourself, not for the faint-hearted, but I think if you're willing to put the effort in, the opportunity is really there.
Also sounds like the right connections are really important, like surrounding yourself with particular people that will help you succeed.
Yeah, but it's about staying listening. Use the networks that you have to have as many conversations as you can and see what comes up from that, because people will want to help you.
Nice. And coming back to taxi and tax traders, what's next?
What is next? We've got a new product that we've released called ProvCheck.
Sounds fascinating.
Checking your provisional tax. I mean, this is accountants of the audience here, and it really solves a pretty challenging workflow piece for them, where their team has to down tools for about 3 days a month to get tax notices out the door. And so it streamlines that radically. We've got about 80 accounting firms either signed up or in the pipeline onboarding with that. And so, again, another thing we do whenever we're talking to our customers is say, what are some of the problems that you're facing right now? What are some of your biggest problems? And that's how ProvCheck was actually born, out of a conversation with an accountant at KPMG saying, hey, what's one of the biggest problems? It's push and pull, right? I mean, I think the iPad is the classic story of that. Wasn't something that anyone was asking for, but now everyone wants one. But generally, stay close to your customers and find out what are some of the problems they're facing, because your current customers are also going to be a really easy source of business for anything new that you're bringing to the table.
I really like that, look at people's problems to make it an opportunity for your business.
Yeah.
It's a nice way to wrap up. So I think that is all we have time for. So
okay, fantastic.
Thank you so much, JT, for coming in and kind of telling your story.
So welcome.
And we will continue to watch and see the success and come along for the ride with all of our Simplicity members. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
This podcast contains personal opinions and is intended to provide educational information only. It doesn't relate to your particular financial situation or goals and is not financial advice or recommendations. Simplicity New Zealand Limited is the issuer of the Simplicity KiwiSaver scheme and investment funds. For product disclosure statements, please visit Simplicity's website, simplicity.kiwi.